Welcome to Brain VR. Today we have Chris Williamson on our show. Chris, welcome, and please could you introduce yourself? Who is Chris Williamson, what he does? And maybe we know that you are locally reversing entropy, but apart from that as well.
Well, gentlemen, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. My name's Chris Williamson. I'm a podcaster and entrepreneur from the UK. I have run club nights for the last decade and a half, so I've watched 1 million people go in and out of nightclubs. I've been on Take Me Out, which is a dating show over here in the UK. I've been on Love Island, which is another dating show over here in the UK. And then about 3 years ago, I made a bit of a life pivot, I suppose, away from being a professional party boy and started to do a podcast called Modern Wisdom. And since then, I've done 330 episodes, 100 plus New York Times bestselling authors like Jordan Peterson, Robert Greene, Ryan Holiday, James Clear, a porn star, the full gamut, right? Talking to everyone. And yeah, that's it. That's what I spend most of my time doing now. I still run my businesses. I've still got some companies that I look after. But my passion and where my energy goes is into the podcast.
It's incredible amount of work, and like the people you've talked to, it's immense inspiration for us because it's our dream to talk to those people and talk to people like you as well. So yeah, it's really cool to see what you are creating and putting out there. So maybe we would like to start. Is there what did you like or loved to do as a child? What was the most interesting to you, and does it somehow map onto what you do now with Modern Wisdom?
Yeah, really good question and perfectly correct. I'm an only child, which is kind of a unique upbringing. There's not many only children around, you know? It's quite a rarity to only have one child in the house, no brothers or sisters. And I spent a lot of time playing sports. I was very big into cricket, so I played cricket endlessly throughout all of my childhood and up until I went to university, and then you find drinking and girls and you get distracted. But I spent a lot of time in my room playing on my own, drawing or playing with toys or doing whatever. But because I didn't have any other brothers or sisters to play with and talk to, I used to have audiobooks on in the background. So every 2 weeks, me and my mum would go to get audio tapes from the local library, and I'd go back home, and if I had to pay the fines, I'd have to pay it with my pocket money and stuff like that. And then, yeah, if you roll the clock forward 20 years, what's the version of an audiobook now in 2021? It's podcasts. So I'm just doing the same thing. I'm still that boy playing in his room. I'm in my room. It's me on my own having a comment. The only difference is that I get to make the audiobook happen, right? So yeah, I often say to people, if they're struggling to discover a passion later in life, if they really just can't find that thing that makes them want to get out of bed in the morning, often just look to what you did between the ages of 6 and 14 purely for fun. You know, a lot of the time, if it was coloring, or maybe you were a bit of a gossip at school, maybe you make a really good reporter, or maybe you really enjoyed drawing, well, why not design, so on and so forth. We often overcomplicate trying to find our purpose and our passion in life. I think life often delivers it to us previously, and then we spend a lot of time trying to rediscover it.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any role model at these times that influenced you?
No, man. I had no one, especially when I was younger, when I was a child. I didn't... It's weird without an older brother or sister either to look up to, because you're just making your own way. And as I'm sure that you guys are aware, the chasm between our parents' generation and ours is quite big. The
Definitely.
Values and the lessons that your parents have to teach you, they don't really apply all that much. So they can give you the basics, but in terms of a very explicit role model, it's really hard to find them. And it took me until I got to university and then started to run businesses and was exposed to businessmen that I thought were shrewd and had business acumen. And I thought, oh yeah, I like the way that he communicates, or I like the way that he deals with business, or he's always really honest. And yeah, it's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember any life-changing experiences, good or bad, that led you to the path you are now? Because from your interviews, I hear that you was in a absolutely like different life few years ago, and modern wisdom, it started like some whole new kind of thing.
Yeah, so being on Take Me Out and Love Island, which were the two reality shows that I did, especially the second one, it didn't cause me to have an existential crisis, but it wasn't far off. I just sort of realized I was spending my time investing my energy into things that I didn't really care about all that much. I wasn't too fussed about getting free charcoal toothpaste or having a blue tick for the sake of it. And I was trying to compete with people on who's the best known drinker, party boy around town. It just didn't align with my values, but because you absorb them from the culture that surrounds you, it's quite easy to just play the game of status for any means, right? You just want to get status. You don't care why you're getting it. You just want to do it. And then, yeah, Love Island was a very sharp dose of contrast, quite an intense experience. And after that, I was like, look, there's something amiss here. I'm not in the right place. And bizarrely, I think it's really useful for people to have that, because without the hammer blow, without the really intense experience, you can just kind of be killed by 1,000 cuts. You know, you can just let days and weeks and months and years slip away as you chase something that you genuinely don't care about. So in that way, not many people go on reality TV to be catapulted towards a life of virtue and integrity. But I was one of those. And yeah, a big part of that was being intellectually honest with myself, learning to tell the truth, you know. And yeah, the podcast was a vehicle.
Yeah.
I really love like power of questions and their power to like absolutely change your life. Were you asking some like hard questions at these times, like before Love Island, that you like keep asking yourself till this day?
No, not really. I think before Love Island, I was mostly focused on those very transient, transactional relationships, gaining status. I'm not very materialistic, so I don't have that bug. But certainly in terms of status and reputation, because as I'm sure that you know, the club promoters local to you as well, that's what we're monetizing, right? We're weaponizing our own status and our reputation. So that to me was all wrapped around in the business and stuff. And yeah, I needed to get out of that. But no, beforehand, I was just concerned with, could I get rid of this hangover today? When's the next night out? You know, who's that hot girl over there? Like, those were the sort of questions that were consuming my thoughts. And every so often, I would allow my intellectual curiosity to kind of come up to the surface. But because that wasn't valued by the people that I was trying to gain status off, I was always damping it down, right? I was always nerfing that desire. And again, people that are listening might feel this, that they have an inner essence, you know, like the logos they have within them, but they don't really let that come out because the people that are around them don't get what that is. And then if they try to talk about that interest that they have, they know that they're potentially going to lose status, or that people aren't really going to understand them, and they just want to be popular and liked and loved like we all do. So yeah, that was an interesting insight for me. It was just allowing myself to have the bravery to be honest, I suppose.
This reminds me a bit of myself when I was 18. Actually, I've been on grammar school, like general one, and I just kind of not really played a role, but unconsciously tried to fit in with everybody else. And it wasn't like good or bad, but it wasn't something that would go from the inner place, like you said a few moments ago. And then I had this insight as well that when I left the school and finally was kind of free and without the same people around me all the time, I've started to kind of find this inner something which was coming up, and it was this curiosity which was dampened down by the kind of educational system, because I was so interested in physics, in philosophy and stuff like that. It was like there was, you know, physics was some mathematical stuff usually, and not very interesting. So therefore I was like dumping it down, and it was not so usual to be interested in all kinds of different stuff, and therefore, yeah, it's the like social status bias basically throughout our lives. So I'm really interested. Now there is this person watching our podcast and listening to it, and you know, he's maybe asking the same question. Maybe he's starting to be like, oh, does this what I do actually, is it coming from this inner kind of source or something? How do I challenge it, and how, if I found something or if I'm on this path of self-discovery already, as you've been maybe 3-4 years ago, where does he go? How does he find out what to want? How does he, you know, where do you go first? Where do you find the relevant information? How do you self-discover? What was your turn in at this point of time?
Go straight to Love Island. That's the solution. Just go
Okay.
on. Just go on Love Island.
Yeah, sure.
That'll teach you everything that you need to know, dude. This is the question, right? How do you find the inflection point or the hockey stick from where it's the hero's journey? It's the beginning. It's the call to adventure. You know, how do you put down the things that all of the people around you are telling you that you should value? The things that society and your past traumas and your genetic predisposition are telling you that you should value or you should go after. How do you drop those and go after something that's really, really meaningful? The first thing I think to realize is that it's the most important task that you have in your life. To take it with requisite reverence and honesty and bravery and courage, because it's not something that necessarily should come easily to you. A lot of the time, you know, we see these titans of status, the Conor McGregors of the world, you know, who've been doing mixed martial arts since they were a child. Athletes, singers, you know, we even see people like Justin Bieber who've been these child stars from when they were kids right up until now, and they're still relevant today, and so on and so forth. And we see them and we think, well, they found their purpose. It was easy for them. They found it 20 years ago. Why haven't I found it yet? And you don't realize that they're the outlier. They're the bug, not the feature. The fact of the matter is that society works for the lowest common denominator. It tries to combine everyone together into this weird sort of aggregate, which is what do most people want that we can kind of give to them or suggest that they should do. So the fact that you don't feel aligned at the moment isn't a surprise. Like, that's the first thing to realize. After that, it's telling the truth is the best piece of advice that I can give you. If you find yourself saying things that you know are falsehoods, even just little white lies about where you were or what you did last night, you know, you want to say the thing that you think is going to make the person across from you think that you're cool or interesting or not weird or whatever it might be. Stop doing that. You need to stop doing that, because you can bury yourself under so many personas that you don't know who you are anymore if you keep on doing it for long enough. Dude, after that, I would say find people, authors, poets, podcasters, YouTubers, whatever, that speak to you and that you can focus and really, really go deep with. You know, I was fortunate with when I started my intellectual awakening, I suppose, because it was right in the middle of Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and Shapiro and Rogan and everyone, right? And you just got essentially an endless amount of mindful content that's going to be emotionally intelligent and teach you. The School of Life by Alain de Botton, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of some of the best insights around human nature that are available. And every year there's more, you know, basically exponentially more. So find a couple of creators that really speak to you and just consume everything that they've got. And you'll start to realize, okay, wow, that's really, really cool. That's really profound. That really speaks to me. And then go and do it. Have the courage to go after it and do it. It's not an easy thing. You need to take it seriously. You need to be honest with yourself. And then you said earlier on, all of us have found that the environment and the community of people that we are with, they influence the values that we have. But if you've got a set of AirPods, you can make your world audially, right? Your auditory world. You can have whoever you want. You can be best friends with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan. You know, just keep them in your ears all day. So yeah, you very much can create the sort of community that you need on the internet, even if it's only a one-way relationship.
Yeah. Like internet these days, it's such a like superpower, like multiplication tool, that we really like the concept of signal versus noise. That when you are like noising around all around, so people just can't read you and don't know what are your inner truths. So they are friends with you based on like their false beliefs about you. And when you start to communicate signal, even on the internet, so you can like filter out the people that you don't want to be like around a lot because they don't like you on a first impression, and you don't need them. So but also with the signal, you can attach the like people with your hobbies and interests and everything else. Just the concept signal versus noise. It's like really nice. And recently I watched your most recent TED Talk, Hope Not Last, about weirdness. I would like to ask you why you consider weirdness such a good thing, and what's your personal weirdness?
Cool. So yeah, my recent TEDx talk, which I had on a very short timeline to write something about, so it needed to be something that I already knew and understood, and embracing your weirdness is kind of the synopsis of everything we've spoken about so far. By weirdness, what I mean is, what is your inner truth? Unmolested and unnerved by society. What is it that you want to do? Not deciding to round off the edges of your personality to be acceptable by people. Now, obviously, you need to do it in some situations, right? We can't deny the fact that there are social norms, but I think we take those so much further, right? We don't just have social norms to inform our behavior. We absorb social norms to actually change our identity. And we start to associate ourselves, identify ourselves with those. The reason that I think weirdness is so important is the only way that we get the maximum amount of access to human potential as a civilization, right? 7.8 billion people. The only way that we get everything, the most fruitful, varied, insightful aggregation of everything that society has, is by everyone doing what only they can do. So I use this example about Salvador Dali, and I say, look, Salvador Dali was mental. He was crazy. His parents thought that he was the reincarnation of his dead brother that died 9 months before him. So his brother died, then he was born, and they called him Salvador, which was what his dead brother's name was. He was masochistic at 10 years old. He used to throw himself down the stairs so that he would, just because he enjoyed pain. So he'd throw himself down the stairs at 10 years old. He had this wife, so he started going out with this girl. He starts having an affair with this lady who's married, and she leaves her husband to go and be with him. And he's adamant, Salvador's adamant that she's his muse, right? Mm-hmm. So he buys her a castle. He starts calling her a queen, and then he only goes to see her in the castle that he bought her upon formal written request from her. So he literally starts to treat her somewhere between royalty and a god. This is the level of bizarreness, right, that Salvador had. But what it permitted him to do was create the surrealism movement and to put artwork out there that would never have been seen. And my point is, if Salvador hadn't embraced his weirdness and been everything that he was, the world would have never received his work. Because as brilliant as he was, Da Vinci didn't do Dali, and Michelangelo didn't do Dali. So the question is, what's your Dali? What is it that only you can do? And this is what I call the weirdness imperative. The fact that you have a duty to give the world what only you can give it, because only you can. The chance of you existing, if you run the genetic likelihoods all the way back 4 billion years, is 1 in 10 to the power of 2,685,000. So that's more particles than are in the entire universe. It's more particles than are in the entire universe if each particle was another universe. It's ridiculously large. Likelihood of you being here is essentially zero. The only way that the world gets what you have to offer is by you just being you, trying to maximize what it is that you can offer the world. I don't see any other better justification for people going after what they want to do. That's how we get the richest access to the potential of humanity. It's by everybody giving them the podcast that only you can. Not the podcast of you trying to do a version of Joe Rogan. We don't need that. We already have Joe. I don't want you to be some bizarre, awful stand-in for Joe Rogan. I want this podcast, right? And the same thing happens for being a parent. Be a parent the way that you think is absolutely best to be a parent. Some people are going to get it wrong. Like, that's awkward. But some people are going to get it more right, and hopefully that information should trickle down. So, yeah.
This is like big theme for us because we kind of the whole podcast, the whole Brain VR brand and podcast started in a tea room, and we were just drinking green tea, getting high on green tea basically, and just talking for hours instead of sometimes maybe boring boring courses on the university like entomology and stuff, which are fascinating, but we were more fascinated by brain and consciousness and reality itself and stuff like that. And after that, we realized we don't know many people that talk about things that we talk about. Like, we felt a little bit weird, and then we felt like there is some value in our conversations, and we started our show, and then found out that there are so many people that feel the same way, and they write us till this day. Hey, I need you have each other to talk to, and I don't have anyone else, because they feel weird and they don't allow themselves maybe to show the signal, or they show the signal but they're just unfortunate. They show it in the real world whereas they maybe should show it these days, as we've talked about, on the internet, right? So this is really I love embracing weirdness, and I loved your TED Talk. It was really great. So great job.
Thank you.
There was I wanted to ask you something. You said that it's such a small chance, basically zero chance of existing. Of how do you integrate, or do you, when you have these kind of informations, how do you integrate them into your life? Because for us, it's really important to focus on the subjective experience, not just, it's a fact. You can read it, you can say it, and for some people it's not gonna mean anything. But for me, it's gonna have this really deep sense of me trying to fulfill the existence itself, or being fulfilled by existence itself, which is so rare. How do you feel about it? How do you integrate the facts, basically, or information which is somewhere out there, which we need to get inside of us and kind of feel it? Do you do that? Do you have some practice to do that? Or does it happen, spontaneously? Or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's quite spontaneous. Mm-hmm. So if I was better organized and maybe more intellectually disciplined, I'd have a really well-programmed Notion database or an Evernote external brain thing, and I'd do a weekly review, and I'd learn the things that I've learned and so on and so forth. But I'm not that organized. That's not me. And I would probably be more effective if it was, but it's not. I've tried the whole ruthlessly indexing everything that I learn tack, and I don't enjoy learning anymore because it makes everything feel like a task to me. So there's this concept from Tim Ferriss called the good shit sticks. Mm-hmm. And that is just the easiest heuristic to use, I think. You're reading a book. Oh, that's interesting. You keep on reading. And then you read something that makes you put the book down and go, Jesus fucking Christ, what was that? What is this insight? So I'll give you one that I learned the other day, okay? Sympathy. Sympathy is investment advice. So what sympathy identifies, human to human, is another individual who will give you the maximum gratitude for the lowest amount of investment. This person is so starving, poor, weak, whatever, that even a tiny, tiny little bit, small gesture from me will make them, they will be so grateful. Mm-hmm. That's why sympathy exists. That's the evolutionary psychology explanation for why sympathy exists. It's investment advice. This person, you feel compelled to help them. Why? Because they will give you so much more gratitude for only a tiny little bit. Don't bother trying to help the king. The king's got more resources than he needs. Try and help the person who's dealing with scarcity. So I read that and I took a photo of it, sent it to 5 different people, my buddies. I was like, holy fucking shit. Have you heard this before? And they were like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So, and that stuck with me, right? So I think if you are the sort of person who can index and create the external brain and have spaced repetition cards on Anki or, whatever formula you want to use, fantastic. I think that those people tend to be outliers, as far as I can tell. Most people just consume information and sometimes it stays with them and other times it doesn't. I would put more faith in your own cognition and your own biology. Look, just listen to stuff, lots of stuff. Read, watch, and some things will stick with you. And when it does, make sure that you act on it. So, okay, I learn about this insight to do with sympathy. What does that mean for me? Well, it means that perhaps my altruistic sensations aren't all that good. Perhaps it's just investment advice from my biology just being really, really smart. Maybe it also means that there are people out there who also could do with my help, but I don't feel sympathy towards them. Perhaps it shouldn't just be me trying to work out how much can I get for how little can I invest. It should be, what is the sort of person that I want to help? Who are the kinds of people that really could do with it? So on and so forth. Or Jordan Peterson, a quote from his, in the middle of a lecture from 7 years ago that's on his YouTube channel. And he says, don't practice what you do not want to become. And he's talking about the way that first we make our habits and then our habits make us. He was also talking neurologically about the way that myelin gets laid down, right? You don't get to choose not to make a habit. You just get to choose which habit you make. And I was like, that synthesizes, don't practice what you do not want to become, synthesizes all of atomic habits. It synthesizes all of neurology, right, and neuroscience, how that works. I was like, that's it. And it's written on my board over there now. And, that's how I would go about it. Find a thing. If the thing that makes you feel awe or dread at the fact that you exist is there's more chance of every particle in the universe being a particle in another universe than you being alive, use that. Or if it's something else, just find the things that speak to you. And that seems to work for me, man. Like the existential shots through the back of the brain, they seem to work for me.
Yeah.
You're doing like a lot of shows, and I've read like you're posting your show like 2 or 3 times a week. Like it's like incredible if all of these people like Michio Kaku and Brian Greene, how you keep in touch in these oh my fucking god moments. Like there must be like so much of them,
Yeah. So that's a good point. It's probably 4 hours a week or 5 hours a week of conversations. Plus there's my research beforehand before I talk to whoever I'm going to talk to. Yeah. A lot of the time now it's getting to the stage where I'll go back and listen to an episode and hear something as if I've heard it for the first time. I'm like, was I there? Was I there when this person said it? There is an upper bound to how much I can take in. I don't have a photographic memory, right? I'm not the guy from Suits. But that being said, the good shit sticks again. It's just a case that now my pool that I'm drawing from is wider. So the shit needs to be more good, right? If I'm going to learn 3 things a week or 5 things a week, but I have access to 100 things a week, the 5 that stick with me, they keep getting knocked off by more and more good stuff. But Brian Greene especially, that guy's an animal. The dude is a complete monster. I'd heard him on Rogan, and then he went back on Rogan a week after I had him. And that guy's insane. He's like psychology doctorate level insight into the human mind, but he's a physicist, like in hardcore mathematics. It's crazy. But it's a privilege, man. It's an absolute privilege to get to speak to these people. It's ridiculous how fortunate it is that you get to talk to them. And then on top of that, everyone else gets to hear it. And then you get to hear it back. Yeah. It's outrageous. I don't know what quirk of the simulation we've managed to look out to be existing in, but it's a beautiful one.
Yeah.
I've got this question that came to my head, because after our first interview in English with John Verweke, which is our role model in like intellectual thinking and debates on consciousness and sense making and everything, we were this feeling like, after this podcast, like, what now? What's next? You know,
where do
like,
you go from John Verweke?
Yeah. Like, should we go back? Like, and how do you manage your dopamine system, your motivation, your desire to move forward in your podcast and in your everyday doing after you've got all these people on your show?
So I'm not always chasing after the biggest fish in the pond, which is one thing. I had this guy, Adam Lane Smith, just some psychologist that wrote a thread on Twitter. And I was like, this thread's really interesting. I wonder if this guy does podcasts. So I DM'd him, brought him on, and man, he crushed it. He absolutely annihilated that episode. It was so good. And he's just some guy, some dude, some fella from the middle of America that's been a psychologist for 20 years and just understands human nature ridiculously well. So it doesn't matter. It's not about, like, Jordan Peterson was on the show, and if you'd said to me when I started the show, who's your dream guest, it would have probably been Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris neck and neck. And I got Jordan. And then Jordan went on Ben Shapiro's show and spent 2 minutes talking about how great my episode with him was, unprompted, out of no... And I'm like, this must be a dream, right, to hear this. But in the same way as you watch sports stars kind of start to up their game, you know, first they want to make it to college basketball, then they want to make it to the minor leagues, then the major leagues, then they want to win a championship, then they want to win back-to-back. That's just the way I see it with podcasting and with any pursuit, right? You know, you want to do the thing, but then you get there and the hedonic adaptation kicks in and you think, right, okay, well, I've got to do something else to make me feel. But I think it's a much more scalable solution to just say, well, I just want to have the best conversation that I can. Because then it doesn't matter whether it's the random guy from the middle of America or Jordan Peterson or Brian Greene or one of my friends who's about to row the Atlantic. It doesn't matter. It's just who can give me the best conversation. And if you're immersed in what you do, it's such a good microcosm, man, for everything that people that do habit setting like James Clear and people that talk about fulfillment and flourishing like Verweke, they talk about just being completely absorbed in the moment of whatever it is that you're doing. And conversations are so good for that because there's no escape. You know, when you're doing a monologue, if it's just you speaking down the pipe, classic YouTuber style, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about this thing. You're always in your own head. You know, you're being taken away by stuff. But this is like running on a treadmill, whereas talking on your own is like running on the road. The treadmill, if I stop talking, you're not going to stop talking, so I need to keep going. So this is why I love conversations. It forces us to keep on moving like that. And if we love what we do, having the conversation, it doesn't really matter who it is. That being said, it's hard to not let plays and objective metrics of success creep in. You know, what was it? Top 20 podcasts in the UK last year on Spotify chart. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, right, okay, top 10 next year. You're like, no, you just won a thing. You just got an award. And your first thought is, right, this is the benchmark for the next one. There's so much to learn from, I think, watching the plays come in like this. I imagine it must be like being a trader on Wall Street or something. You know, it's very objective. There's metrics. You can see what's happening. And then you learn and you learn and you learn and you iterate and you get a little bit better. Yeah, there's so much to learn from that, man. But just enjoying what it is, you know, because I could do podcasts for the rest of my life and continually chase whatever the next million, 100 million, whatever plays, downloads, chart position is. And you could get to the end of your life and be like, well, now what? All I did was just chase those accolades, as opposed to going, right, I just want the best conversation I can. And if the accolades come, then fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And somewhere between all of these podcast shows and club promotions and managing your business, do you have sometimes the trouble to feel alone? This feel of loneliness in between between all of these actions?
Yeah, so that's an interesting insight. The more that you decide to do things non-typical, and the less normal that you decide your life set up to be, inevitably the fewer people are going to be like you. So there's a price to be paid. There is a price to be paid that I spend a lot of time in solitude because I have to, because I need to work in solitude. I can't be here with my friends or, be on a night out if I'm doing this. And if you want to run a business and if you want to do other things, again, you asked at the beginning what some of the things I did as a kid. Well, I spent a lot of time in solitude. So I'm already programmed for this, right? I was prepared to do this, which is a competitive advantage. I love spending time with my friends, but I'm an introvert at heart. So I get my energy from being on my own, which is fortunate because I spend most of my time on my own. But yes, loneliness is a kind of tax that you have to pay to atone for a certain complexity of mind. Like if you are the sort of person that thinks and cares deeply about things, the inevitability is that there are fewer and fewer people like you, right? Which means that it's going to be harder for you to connect with other people around you. So you need to make sure that you find sufficient meaning in the work that you do or the people that you do connect with, that it offsets that. But yeah, there's a price to be paid for everything, man. People shouldn't look at these hyperachievers, the Elon Musks of the world, or the Conor McGregors, or the Joe Rogans, and think that they don't pay a price. They all pay a price. You just don't get to see what it is.
That's beautifully said. Like you have to pay the price for complexity of your mind. Thank you for this.
What is something that interests you now the most? Because it feels like you said, there are so many and so diverse topics and people on your show. How? Because we have some intellectual curiosity. It's mainly consciousness and the nature of reality and stuff like that, and psychology and neuroscience. So we are I feel like we are generalists, but we go into some place kind of. How do you feel like, or what's the most interesting thing that you are going towards, basically, if there is some, or are you generalist and interested in all these topics?
So yeah, everyone that I talk to, I'm fascinated by, and there's something to learn from. I'm really into existential risk at the moment, and I have been for about 3 years or so. Toby Ord's book, The Precipice, which came out towards the start of last year, is just outstanding. Like, it is such a world-changing read. It's probably one of the most impactful books I think I've ever read, because it shows you human civilization from such a broad view. It's a 3 million mile view of the world, right? You're seeing it in all of its fragility on this knife edge, and all of the different ways that human civilization might not get to full flourishing, might not get to inherit its full civilizational potential. And that's one of them at the moment. I'm really, really fascinated by existential risk. Consciousness. Sam Harris's most recent talk on free will that he did, that 90-minute monologue that he did on free will, is just outstanding, even though I've been a sort of a free will red pillar for a little while. Reality as well is a big one. But I'm also interested in meaning, finding meaning, which is what drew me to John Vervaeke's work. What does it mean to find meaning in life? How do we discover a reason that we're here? Is that even a valid question? Are we just these deterministic vehicles for our genetics, slowly propagating our way through to the end of the grave? Or is there something more to be found? Do we have to find our own? These are questions that you lie awake at night thinking about, with good reason, because they're terrifying and wonderful and beautiful and dreadful all at the same time. And yeah, how could you not be? I feel so much pity for people that aren't curious. I really, really do. It's the most important personality trait that I have. And it's the most powerful one, I think, that you can have in the 21st century, because you're just going to continuously have shots on goal. You guys said it earlier on. You were talking about how I reached out to you because I listened to your episode with John. Every time that you do something, every time that you put something out there, have an interaction with someone, that's a shot at the goal. Not every time you're going to score, but the more times that you start having shots, the more chances you have of scoring. And if you're curious, it's almost like the goal is pulling your ball toward it. You know, you're compelled to take shots because you want to know what's on the other side of that goal. So you kick the ball and maybe it's a bit boring. And then you kick the next ball and you're like, oh my God, I just found out what the fuck sympathy is. And then you kick the ball again and you have a conversation with John Bavecki. And then I reach out to you and say, guys, well done. So, you know, I think, yeah, those are some things.
That's great. That reminds me of Naval Ravikant's concept of luck. First, you have dumb luck, which you just, you just find this treasure. Then you have this hard-working luck, where you are actually looking for the treasure and you find it. And then the lucks find you because you are the only person that can get to the treasure who someone else has found. So it feels like that. You are maximizing for luck, basically, and you pulling the luck towards you by being actually authentic, by doing a great job maybe at what you do. So what is... After all these conversations, after this journey of yours, what is the stance that you have on reality and maybe consciousness? And maybe you've said the free will red pill, because we also like free will, and I think we have been red pilled for quite some time as well. So what is the stance, if there is some, or if you are just, because we are still asking, but we have some kind of point of view. So which is your point of view on those kind of topics?
So I think I would class myself as the very common spiritual but not religious crowd for the 21st century, which is what Sam Harris talks about in Waking Up. But I've read far too much evolutionary psychology to believe that we are anything other than at the mercy of our genes. Someone said it. One of the listeners commented this on a post the other day, and it was so right. He said, why would we believe that physics stops at the border of our skulls when you're talking about determinism? You know, you can predict all of the motions of everything if you had sufficient information, and yet there's supposed to be some secret source inside of our brains. The question that I would ask Sam if I got a hold of him is, so what? How does determinism, or my lack of free will, how should it inform the way that I see the world? I don't hear him go as deeply into that area of it. And really, to me, that's the tip. That's the very, very tip of the spear. Okay, you've convinced me, Sam. I am just at the mercy of the actions that came before me. And I have randomness and I have determinism, and more randomness doesn't equal more free will. But so what? What? How should I view myself within the world? Even if me choosing to view myself in that way isn't my choice, how should it inform the way that I see myself? What do you guys think?
Yeah, this is really interesting because we've just been speaking about it on our Czech podcast, and for us, it's whatever your construct is as close to reality as it can be. So don't like. It's not way to bullshit yourself, but if you have this red pill and it's not useful for you, well, throw it out. You don't need to feel bad for not having free will or feeling like you are not having free will. So for us, it comes down to a question of, okay, what is the most useful thing for me in this kind of area? So if I have red pilled myself about free will, I know that the feeling of free will is really, really important, because we also have read and actually had a course on evolutionary biology and read so much about evolutionary psychology as well. So it's like one of the most important concepts and constructs that we can have, and it's really useful. And for us, it's not like there is this argument, okay, I don't have free will, so I will just lay on the couch and do nothing, right? But that's just how your brain reacts to the information of not having free will. My brain, on the other hand, reacts, oh my God, I am, I'm affected by all these things around me. So let's work with that. I'm just gonna design the universe that I want to live in. I'm gonna design my thoughts, I'm gonna design my surroundings, and it doesn't matter if it's free will or not, because this is how my brain reacts to that. So it's kind of paradoxical that it gives me more freedom. And it's so hard to explain to people. We had like 2-hour talk, like live talk, like 2 years ago on that, but it's just so hard to wrap our brain, like human brain, around that, because it's such a complex system. Our organism, it's millions of neurons. So yeah, I think it's so useful concept that we shouldn't try to abandon it. But some, on the other hand, thinks that it's useful to feel like not having free will. And he said on Lex Fridman's show that he actually can get into a state where he doesn't feel like he is having free will, like from his subjective experience.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's insane, and that's how his brain reacts, and that's useful for him, but it might not be useful for other people. So I feel like there has to be, okay, how is it going to be useful for you, and how can you make your brain react in a way that's going to be beneficial in the future? So that's kind of my stance on that. Yeah.
I think I wonder whether you would be able to get to where Sam's gotten to without his non-dualism insights. You know, he's done so much Dzogchen meditation, the purpose of which is to remove that dualistic perspective, that there is a difference between the thinker and the thoughts, that you are having an experience inside of your head, etc. I'm not there yet. I identify with my thoughts. I identify with my experience far more than I should do. You know, in my absolute most pure moments, every so often I get to notice that, as he says on Lex's show, when you're looking for your keys and you tell yourself, where are my keys? Who the fuck are you telling? Yeah. You know, you are the person that lost the keys, the person telling yourself you need to find the keys, and the person finding the keys. Like, who are you talking to, and who's listening? So yeah, dude, I mean, there is something beautiful about it. There is something beautiful about thinking, okay, I am, at least in our perspectives, I am just this random collection of matter that somehow is able to abstract and appreciate its own existence. I can do whatever I want. There's some constraints. You know, you've got the laws of physics are constraints, and some people have responsibilities, and most of us have some form of financial limitation, but we also have far many more degrees of freedom than we think. So many more. And when you realize that, you go, well, okay, nature and physics and finances and society and norms and everything is trying to condense down and reduce and bring the guardrails in on what I can do. You know, even this determinism thing, even if the path that I have in front of me is already written, everything is trying to make me do this. And yet, I have this sensation that I can do whatever I want, and I can. And just by making that decision, just by thinking, okay, what do I want to do today? How do I want to spend my time? Like, that's the sort of thing that, especially now, you know, in 2021, where there's so much abundance and so much comfort and so many liberated ways that you can spend your life. Everyone that's listening to this can, this evening, probably go wherever they want. You can walk wherever they want. They won't be eaten by a tiger. They won't freeze to death. They will go home to a house. Like, dude, it's awesome. It's awesome in the purest sense of the word.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that the complexity of our world and us being that world basically, and being inside of that as well, is it's actually a cure for this as well. For maybe feeling, if I'm anxious from that, I have no free will or something. You know, if I get the arguments and my brain reacts that it makes me anxious, I feel like it's so useful because we just don't know. We are not Laplace's demons that know every particle in the universe that would predict the future. It's just not true, and it's not even possible for us to be true by any logical sense or means, because we would need another universe to compute this universe. Therefore,
so just enjoy the fucking ride, man. Yeah. You know, like, just enjoy the ride, because if you don't enjoy thinking about this question, then go and think about another one.
Yeah.
You know, there is an infinite number of questions to ask, but the point shouldn't be worry about the end. And we all do, you know, we're constantly fighting against our biological programming to fear death, threat response, whatever it might be. But if you just try and bring yourself back to the fact that it's so unlikely that you're here, and it's so brief the time that you are, and for all that we know, once you're gone, that's it. Game over. No redos. The game of Roy that they play in Rick and Morty, you don't go back to the carpet store, right? Never go back to the fucking carpet store.
You've said you are spiritual. What do you mean by that? Because we feel like we are spiritual as well. So maybe how do you define spiritual in your own way or life?
I would say that meaning feels transcendent. It feels like it's beyond you, like there is something that pulls you forward. There are sensations and implications of your actions that you see occur in the people around you, and it feels grander than just the simple interaction, right? This is the weird thing to do with emotions. So all that emotions are technically is just a particular bath of chemicals in the body or a particular sequence of firing of synapses in your brain. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like this blessing or a curse from a god, right? From a higher power. This is why they used to think that the gods were the god of love and the god of envy and the god of the underworld and the god of the seas, because that's how grand this sensation feels. And to me, reveling in just how compulsive and overbearing and insanely full our experience is, like that, to me, my mum's a Reiki master and has been for 2 decades. So, you know, she does crystals and angel stuff, and she's big into astrology and all of that. That pushes it a little bit far for me. But I can still appreciate wonder beyond the simple biological interaction of whatever it is that I think when she tells me about it. And I think this is one of the things we've thrown away from tradition that we should dispense with very carefully, that sense of awe is not only adaptive for happiness in life, but it's a degree of access to a particular type of emotion that you can't get in any other way. You know, I went to the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican a couple of years ago for my birthday, and I'm stood in the middle of the Vatican just looking up at the top of the cathedral, and you get this sense, reverence and awe, man. And I think that those are sorts of sensations that have been taken away from us. You know, what do you get awe at now? You have to go, people try and go on a plane ride or extreme whitewater rafting or jumping out of off a bungee jump in an effort to try and feel what previously we could get narrative, in terms of our narrative, in terms of the personification of what it was that we felt. So I don't know if that defines it at all, but basically meaning feels transcendent and that it's more than just our biology.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us it's a little bit similar. We like non-religious spirituality. I think that's what you're talking about as well, kind of. And also for me it connects with like this meaning as we are talking about it, because I feel like an existence itself and my subjective experiences and me, I am inherently transcendent. Like I'm transcending myself basically just by being, just by and everybody does just by being. You are born and already you are transcending yourself, because you as a baby are projected into other people's minds and physically change their brain. And we are doing that to each other right now, and we are doing that to our audience. And I'm thinking about our audience right now they are doing that to me right now. And so we are inherently transcending creatures basically. And that's, for me, it's so powerful to just go into nature and do this. John Vervaeke actually has this Epicurean practice where he goes into nature and he marvels and he's in awe with all the connections between him and nature throughout the lifetime of the universe, basically. And you can think of those, but you can't pinpoint them. You can't, you can't, oh, there it is. That's the connection. You can only think of them. And the thinking then transforms into feeling. And it feels transcendental a little bit. And if you practice that, it's such a amazing feeling being connected to the nature, being connected to the universe, because it feels like in this world of objectification and that we kind of downgrade our subjective experience, which you are basically talking about as spiritual.
Dude,
because it's
100%.
It's so complex, and we love this concept or word. Maybe you know it. It's called sonder. You kind of go. It's like a variation on wonder. You go around and you just see people, and you try to imagine how it is like to be in their experience. You see this flesh and this face, and it doesn't tell you much. But then you imagine, oh my God, this person has such a complex and colorful experience as I do. That's so amazing. And I do this when I'm traveling by underground, and I'm like just blown away by all the people, and they are like, reading something, and you feel like, oh my God, it must be like so boring, like he's reading papers or something. No, it's not boring. He has such a colorful experience as you have, and that's we love that so much, because it makes the world really, really rich. So these are really, I think, like amazing things.
I think that's the problem with trying to go too hard and deep with a reductionist, utilitarian, deterministic view of the world. It struggles to capture the phenomenological sense of just how insane it is to exist. And that's why people inevitably push back. The uninitiated, non-red pillars for free will, it's so counter to what it is that we believe. But I do wonder how much we've lost, with trying to create a rationalist view of the world that can be explained deterministically. You go, okay, well, this is the and so what question to Sam. Like, even if it's the truth, how does it impact or inform the way that I should operate within the world? And I much prefer the world that you've just mentioned there. Like, here's another thing as well that I've considered. So for anyone that's going through a breakup or is going through a time where they've lost somebody else, one of the craziest things a lot of the time, we put other people up on a pedestal, right? So the person that we're with, we get attracted to them, we get attached, whether that be a friend or a family member or a partner. And a lot of the time we can see in them all of the good stuff, and yet we watch our own blunders from a front row seat. You watch yourself just constantly, permanently fail through life as you don't get up on time, and you don't finish that last rep in the gym, and you don't do this and you don't do that and you don't do the rest, right? And what that can easily lead us to is to bow to these others, or to feel like we are inferior to them because we only get to see a highlight reel of their lives that they actually end up telling us. But let's flip it on its head with what you just said there. You are the only person that will ever get to see the full breadth and colorfulness of your own experience. So what that means is that you know how deep your own consciousness goes, but you're the only person that does. And that person, all that you got to see of them is like what they decided to tell you and maybe some funny anecdotes every so often. If you flip that around, you realize that you are the prize within your own life, because the depth and the breadth and the level of finitude that you can see within your own experience is so much greater than you could in anybody else's. So why wouldn't you be the prize? You know just how deep your thoughts go. That person's just, they're just a flash in the pan. They're just waving cheerily on the shore as you row along. And that often makes me think, like when buddies are going through bad times, I'm like, dude, you know the things that you think. You know how deep your thoughts go. You're the prize, not anybody else, not even me telling you this. I'm just trying to direct you a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great insight. And in our heads, in our brains, I'm fascinated by all of these mechanisms, like evolutionary mechanisms, a few 100,000 millions years old there, that are trying to protect you. That you have this network, like default mode network in your head, that's dragging your thoughts to the future, to the past, analyzing every moment and possible fail of your life, and it's narrowing your view of the world, that you are just like, you have these glasses, and on them there is just your like shit talk, your own shit talk, and you can't see the world around you. And it's like what I really love the most on John Verwecke's presentations and series, that you mentioned the awe, the moment of impression, and this opens you up to the world. And you can participate on the world again, and not just on your shit talk. Like, your shit talk is important to you, because it's trying to protect you, but you can go to the world and really enjoy stuff. That's really nice. And I think like it's really like, that's why we started the podcast, like the evolutionary biology and realizations what processes are in our heads. It alone helps people to know that, yeah, it's just the process, and you can manage it. You can voice down the voice in your head, and you can like, yeah. I'm circling around in my thoughts.
I think I said to Diana Fleischman, who is Jeffrey Miller's wife, I said to her, do you think that mindfulness practice or a meditation practice without an insight to evolutionary psychology is wasted? And she said yes. And I'd agree. I think that there's a layer that you're missing. When you get to understand your own thoughts and you are tuned into the texture of your own mind, that's great. But unless you know why is it there? Okay, yes, of course, that's what a threat response does. I feel threatened about my potential awkward meeting at work tomorrow, the same way as I would feel threatened if I lived in a tribe of 100 people and the tribe chief was coming to give me a base day. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. You know that it doesn't matter at all. And as soon as you can see through that, whether it be to do with jealousy, why is jealousy there? Oh, well, it's making me pine after this person so that I can do mate guarding because maybe somebody else will come in and do that. No, it's fine. It's fine. This is not the same situation. The emotions that you have are maladapted for the situation that you are in. But by knowing that, you need the mindfulness to be able to detect it, but you need the evolutionary psychology insight or the psychological insight to actually work out why. And I think that that's if you're in a zombie movie and you don't just shoot them once, you double tap. I think that's the double tap to kill bad thoughts.
We feel about meditation is one of and mindfulness as well is big topic for us as well. We are also like half of our podcast is also about biohacking, how to optimize not only our brain and mind but also our body, and just overall to feel better in the world. Just basically we realize that our subjective experience is the only thing that we have, and we want to try to make it just a little bit better, and that's the only goal that we have. And we feel like mindfulness and meditation is actually useful, 100% useful, based on the neuroscience research and based on our experience with it as well, that it is actually a mechanism not only to sit down and try to not think thoughts, which isn't really what it is about. You can't really not think thoughts, but it's actually a process where there is filtration of basically not useful or effective processes of your mind and brain. So it's really powerful with insights from evolutionary psychology, but there is this inherent characteristic of meditation, which it can filter out not useful mechanisms and processes, which I think is really powerful, and it can give you this bubble of time between the reaction to some stimuli, and if you pair that with like Stoicism, it doesn't have to be evolutionary psychology. It can be Stoicism, which basically draws from evolutionary psychology by some weird kind of random, I think, fault.
So that beat that you're talking about, the break in between stimulus and response. I have a buddy, Corey Allen, who does Aubrey Marcus's meditation courses, and he calls it the mindfulness gap. So that beat, a thing happens, and you respond, and you get to notice, you get to see it happen. You don't just jerk in. And then when you start to scale this up, obviously I've stood in the front door of a lot of nightclubs, and especially when people have had a few drinks and maybe they're getting aggressive with someone, or maybe a girl's getting upset, and you just see this mindfulness gap has completely dissolved away, and this person's entirely at the mercy of their programming. You know, someone can come over to them it's like magic, or like a curse of some kind. Somebody else can come over to someone and like do a thing and make them do a thing. They can like poke them or say something to them and elicit a response inside of that person with no conscious choice in between stimulus and response. And I think that that's what everybody should be searching for. Get the mindfulness gap. Have that, because that's power. That's real power, especially in 2021.
I think the next really useful tool to work with your mind is mental models, which we're a fan of, mostly thanks to your podcast with George Mack. I would like to ask you, what are your favorite mental models you use, or you often remind yourself of?
Yeah, that's awesome. My favorite mental model that I use the most is never multiply by zero. So imagine that you're doing an equation, and you can have 900,000 multiplied by 10, multiplied by 3, multiplied by 455, multiplied by 0. You get 0, right? You come out with 0. And you apply this to your life quite easily by thinking, what is a thing that I can do that would mean that I am no longer able to play the game? What is such a big fail in life that it basically kicks me out of the game, or actually kicks me out of the game? And that's what you need to avoid. So much of success in life is simply avoiding failure as opposed to chasing after effectiveness. So a good example, let's say that you spend all of your time in the gym, you're biohacking, you've got your circadian rhythm dialed in, you're doing keto, you understand the glycogen index of everything that you're eating, but then one day you decide to ride a motorbike without a helmet and you get hit by a car. It doesn't matter how fit you are, you're very dead. So all of those 10,000 times 995 multiplied by 0, nothing left. Then let's imagine you're a young girl or a young guy, and you've spent the first few years of your adulthood up to 22, 23 working hard, and you've been earning money, you've been really frugal with your finances, maybe you've invested some smartly, and you're just about to buy your first house. And you're like, wow, I'm going to own my first house at 24 years old, completely bootstrapped by my own effort. Amazing. But then one night out, a couple of months before you decide to put a deposit down, you go on a night out, you have unprotected sex, and you get pregnant, or you get someone pregnant. Like, that's £250,000, 18-year liability that you've just created off the back of the fact that you wanted, a marginal amount more pleasure than you would have got, or because you hadn't prepared because you didn't have a condom with you. That's a 0. That's a big fat 0. Like, I'm aware that it's slightly less of a 0 than killing yourself in a motorbike accident, but so much of the challenges that we have in life come from huge failures. It's just seeing those coming. Okay, texting while you drive. Like, this is a mental model from Naval. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So what is the prize that you get for winning at playing the game that you're playing now? Like, what's the prize that you get for always keeping your DM request number at 0 on Instagram, as opposed to just batching it and letting it build up? Like, what do you actually win by constantly replying to people, other than just iterating on your own neuroticism when you continually open the app and you drill that habit? So never multiply by 0 is one of my favorites. Hanlon's razor and Occam's razor are both quite interesting. McGill's razor is another good one. So George is one where he says, when offered two different decisions, choose the one which has the most luck attached to it. Another one, which would be my version of that, is when you're given two opportunities in life, choose the one that has the most opportunity for adventure. that also tends to be the one that has the most fear attached to it, but just that you'll find more luck where there is more adventure, I think. Signal versus noise is an important mental model, thinking about how often, and that links in with play stupid games. So how often do I need to do this thing? The frequency of checking the markets every hour versus once a year. For your investments, you get so much more signal instead of noise if you just do it annually. But I recently had Julia Galef on the podcast, if you're familiar with her. So she's a woman from the rationality movement. She's just got a new book out called The Scout Mindset. So she's been big into lesswrong.com and Scott Alexander's blog, Astral Codex 10 and stuff. And she really hit on something, man. She said, and I totally agree with her, I love mental models. I think that they're fantastic, but they only do a third of the job as far as I'm concerned, because there was a period when Shane Parrish started really blowing up with fs.blog, and everyone thought that if they read Gabriel Weinberg's book and they read all of fs.blog and I could memorize, glossary, define every mental model, that basically I'm never going to make mistakes again. Now, well, no, that's obviously not how it works. Like, evidently that's not how it works. You don't just need to know the mental models. And I wonder how much of the rationality mental models movement was people kind of just circle jerking the opportunity to protect themselves whilst not actually having to do anything. Like, people that learn mental models have no skin in the game other than the time that they spent learning mental models. Mm-hmm. And talking to Julia, I was like, the Scout Mindset, her book is much more action focused. It's okay, so here's some biases that I need to know. Fundamental attribution error, or availability bias, or whatever it might be. But what does this mean for me? The Sam Harris free will thing, like, great, Sam, but how does it inform how I act? And that... taking it from system 2 to system 1, or from like system 0 to system 2 to system 1, is really, really important. How do you inculcate the stoic fork? How, when something happens, do you ask yourself the first response, is this something I have control over? Like, that takes time. But if you just learned the stoic fork, like armchair philosophizing about what stoicism is, you don't benefit from the actual impact of it. So I think I would advise people that like to learn about mental models to just pick one, pick one for 3 months and think, right, I'm just going to try and see this everywhere in everything that I do, and then go on.
That reminds me of 3 mental models. It reminds me of map versus territory, clouds and dirt, and G.I. Joe fallacy. Are you familiar with G.I. Joe fallacy? Okay. So,
no.
Basically,
no, what's that one?
Oh, that's there's this cartoon show, G.I. Joe. It was like in 80s, I think, in America, or 90s or something. And at the end of the show, there was this saying, well, now you know, and that's half the... I don't know, half the battle. Yeah, now you know, and that's half the battle or something. So we basically were talking about that, and it's like, and it's on fs.com, right, on the blog, Farnham Street, and it's basically, no, it's not 50% of the battle won. It's like maybe 10%, and now you need to go into the dirt. Like, it's the cloud. You need to go into the dirt, and for us, mental models are amazing because they've been basically just packaging the things that we were already using. They were basically pinpointing and wording the things that we were talking about and thinking about, and it was so easy for us to integrate them after that because we were already using them basically. And now,
yes, so you knew them and now you had a name.
Yeah, now it's so for us it's like this holy grail because oh my god, we can, like, we have this in our minds now and we can really use it like we use them all the time. So there is something we are talking about, and there is this some problem or something. And we ask ourselves, did you use this model? Like, it reminds me of that. And we really use it like almost every day in many, many situations. So for us, it was kind of your 4 podcasts with George Mack. That was amazing. Yeah, we want to...
I've got Shane on the show. I've got Shane Parrish coming on the show next month.
Wow.
So I might do Mental Models 105 with him and get him on. So yeah, that'll be That'll be interesting, man. But dude, if you guys are focusing on action with that, then you've got it right.
Yeah,
you definitely got it right.
We try to. I'm not sure if to go into that, but anyway, I'm gonna try that. If I would give you a choice, I've you know this choice. It's a blue pill, which doesn't do anything to you, and you are still living your life as you lived up until this point. And I can give you a red pill, which is going to change the way you see the world, and what you see or learn, it cannot be unseen or unlearned. Which one do you choose?
It's always red pill, man.
Yes.
It's always red pill. That's the one that has the most adventure in it.
Yes. So I'm gonna give you one red pill from us and then ask you for one back. So this might not be a red pill which is going to change you see the world, because you probably are, red pills are your thing, I think. So it's going to be maybe for our listeners and for ourselves. But it's the thing I've talked about today, which is always blowing my mind. What is happening at this moment? And it's the red pill that we have your physical representation in our brain right now. You are sitting somewhere in Britain and you are sitting in front of a camera, and there are photons reflecting from you to the camera. From the camera, it goes into the, somewhere into stuff we don't understand. And then it comes out of our monitor in photons. It goes into our eye, then it's transformed into electrical signal, and then it's interpreted by our brain, and it changes the brain, like it affects your whole life basically, and it physically changes your brain. So this is a red pill which I'm always trying to remind myself, because it gives me this awe about the universe, about our experience, because it's just so fascinating and it really changes my experience. So you've changed our life, and we've changed your life as well. It doesn't have to be significant, but just the fact that we talked to each other, that we actually saw each other on Instagram, and all these things change our life. But forever. It doesn't have to be big change, but it's just the change. So this is something that I wanted to tell you, and this is our red pill. So
I love it, man. Well, think about, to just bootleg off the back of that, think about the shots on goal. Like every time that you do a thing, it's a shot at the goal. Mm-hmm. So how many times do you want to try and change people's lives while you're here? Is there any greater way to spend a finite life than trying to do things that will have impacts after that finitude has hit? How can you inform the rest of your family, your friends, your local community, your country, etc.? What lives can you impact in the most profound way that you can? Like, that is a way to transcend death. You don't need to fear death if the things that you've done and the values that you've inculcated have existed long after you're gone. Of course you don't. That doesn't mean that you need to spend all of your life doing stuff for other people. But it does mean that you can have that impact. The ghost of you, the ghost of your ideas can still happily, hopefully, haunt through the world long after you're gone. And yeah, man, the changing lives thing is, when you realize it, when you understand the impact that we all have on each other, I think it increases the seriousness, the level of importance that we should take our existence with. It should be more serious. People should take it seriously. We can laugh, but we need to laugh with the knowledge that time's limited. So, get going.
Yeah, definitely. What's your red pill for us?
Mine's a bit different. Mine is to do with dating, and this is from online data science assessment of Tinder. So the bottom 20% of women are competing for the bottom 80% of men, and the top 80% of women are competing for the top 20% of men. So you have this huge hypergamous relationship, right? Where you have most of the men competing for not most of the women, and you have most of the women competing for not most of the men. The men in the 80% are dating what's called down and across, and the women in their 80% are dating up and across. So the reason that it makes people uncomfortable is that inevitably it means that there are more men than there are women in most of the interactions that men go into, and there are more women than there are men in most of the interactions that women go into. So what we learn, or what we can learn from that, is that as a woman, you should, as best you can, try and decouple how you feel for a man from his level of wealth, from his height, and from his level of education. And similarly, for a man, you should try and decouple the way that you feel about a woman as much as you can from her age and her looks. Because these are the gatekeepers, right? Men are signaling fertility, which is youth, and fertility signals, status signals, fitness signals, and women are signaling for status resources. But you can find people who you can open up your dating pool in ways that you couldn't have ever thought of before if you're able to kind of deprogram that. And it's difficult because it's inbuilt into us to be attracted to these things. It's why men drive fast cars and women get boob jobs, right? Like men spend their money on status signals and women spend their money on fitness signals. That's the way that the world works. But again, just seeing that, just understanding that here's another one, man. This is mental. So you've got a marriage, right? You've got man and woman together pooling their resources. You know, man goes to work, woman goes to work. Maybe they got kids, maybe they don't. But then when it comes to them buying something that's just for themselves, they buy something which is a purposeful signal to other people of the opposite sex that isn't their partner, right? So women spend more money than men on cosmetics. So they'll go and get makeup and make themselves feel nice. And they do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all women are going out and buying makeup so that they can signal to all of the other men that are out there, but it's just a part of their source code. And the man is in his 40s and he thinks, oh, I'll get myself a fast car. I deserve a fast car. Well, why are you attracted to the fast car? Well, it's because it's a hard to fake signal of status. So you've now got this fast car that makes everybody else know, oh, wow, that guy's got a lot of resources. But that's shared resources being used purely to attract the opposite sex outside of a relationship, and nobody even thinks about it. Everyone just goes, oh yeah, well she's getting on a little bit, she got some work done, maybe she got some new boobs or whatever, that's lucky for her husband. And you're like, well yeah, but it was half of it was his money that she's used to signal to other men, and then he does the same thing. It's like, oh well, he wanted to get himself a new car, and it's like, hang on, she paid for half of that car, and he's just so yeah, those two, 80-20 rule, the Pareto distribution works within dating on Tinder, and the status signals for men and women. Uncomfortable truths, but interesting ones at least.
Great. They're great.
Well, that's really crazy. Chris, I would like to ask you our favorite question. What are your daily routines? How do you spend your day?
Cool. So, wake up at just before 7 o'clock, usually. Walk, come back, journal, meditate, salt and lemon in water. So LMNT or Element is a sponsor of the show. They're amazing. If you need a new salt drink on the morning, they're outrageous. LMNT.com. Meditation, reading for about 15 to 20 minutes, rehabilitation movements. I ruptured my Achilles last year, so I do about 20 minutes of rehabilitation. Cook for the day, then single biggest task, whatever that frog is, eat the frog first thing, then train, usually around about midday, just a little bit after, come back, eat. Second session of work, usually a little bit more shallow, emails, contact. Then about 4 p.m, start to prepare or continue preparing for the guest. 6 p.m, record with the guest. 7:30, go for a walk on an evening. 8:30 p.m, eat dinner with my housemates through in the living room, maybe watch some sport or something. 9 p.m-ish, 9:30 p.m, go to bed, read for half an hour to an hour, go to sleep, 10:30-ish.
Great, thank you so much.
It reminds me of Jocko Willink, discipline equals freedom.
Yeah. I wanted to ask for your, if you were to give someone a book maybe from past year or your favorite book of all times, what would it be?
The Almanac of Naval Ravikant is probably the most dense book in terms of wisdom I think that I've ever seen. It's terrifying.
Yes, it's great.
So that's a good place to get people to start. If they wanted to get into some evolutionary psychology that both of us have gone through today, The Ape Who Understood the Universe by Steve Stuart Williams is amazingly accessible, or The Moral Animal by Robert Wright, which is a little bit more of a challenging read, but is outstanding, so good. And then Essentialism by Greg McKeown, if you just want a life design, quite easy to apply book. That's like my 4-car garage. If you were to say, give me four books that everybody should start their self-development journey with, you can pick one, 3. You can pick one of the 2 from the Eve Psych books, Almanac of Naval Ravikant and then Essentialism.
Okay, thank you for the tips. They're amazing. We love Robert Wright as well. We have some book which I can't remember the name because
Why Buddhism is True.
That's one, and there is other one.
It's Logic of a Human's Nature.
Yeah, Logic of a Human's Nature, something like that.
Cool.
It's powerful as well. Dude, this was amazing. Chris, thank you so much for your time. This feels surreal a little bit, but it feels like we are kind of mates now. I hope that's true, and we're gonna speak in the future, sometime in the future again, because this was really amazing. We can dive deeper into some of the topics because I think we are interested in similar stuff. So thank you so much for your time, and it was really amazing experience for us.
Yeah, my pleasure, boys.
It was a pleasure.
Keep doing what you're doing. You're crushing it, man. You're absolutely crushing it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Where can people find you?
Yes.
And find your content?
Search Modern Wisdom wherever you listen, so Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Search Chris Williamson on YouTube or Instagram or Twitter at ChrisWillX. And then I do a series of life hacks on the podcast. And if you want a free ebook with every life hack that we covered over the first season, so there's 200 of them for free, chriswillx.com/life hacks. And you can just download it for free. There's some places you can get me.
Yeah, the life hacks, it's absolutely awesome ebook, and I was just paralyzed about the amount of information there, because it's so good and so many. So I recommend it to everyone that are listening to this podcast. Chris, once again, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. I feel really grateful right now, and looking forward to your future episodes and maybe to some future meeting.
Yes,
brother. Thank you.